The first time I was ever around it and introduced to it was my sophomore year. My best friend, she took me to go meet up with some of her old friends, and she picked up like a balloon of heroin and smoked it in the car in front of me, and it was like something you can't forget. The smell and the sound of the tinfoil burning and the smoke that comes up, I will never forget the way it looked. And then literally 2 weeks after, she was withdrawing and her parents had found out and sent her to rehab. And I didn't get to talk to her for 2 years after that, and she just changed so fast.
I think it's a very attractive drug to the youth, not only because it's cheap, but because it's a heavy drug and there are a lot of emotional problems with people currently today. There's a lot of social problems that these emotions can stem from. And there's a lot of manipulation in the world with media and, unattentiveness at school, or whatever it may be, if they feel neglected by their parents, or if they feel oppressed by their parents and they want freedom or they want to numb their bad emotions. So using drugs such as opiates, heroin, even Oxycontin, morphine, anything like that, it's just trying to numb what is. It's hard for me to see a great percentage of the population drawn toward that drug for whatever reason.
Of course, I think Salt Lake City has a heroin problem. Everyone's doing heroin. People that are 13 years old are going into these houses with heroin addicts and smoking heroin, not even knowing what they're doing, because these older kids are saying, hey, come try this. This is a new cool thing.
My brother, all throughout elementary school, all throughout middle school, up until his senior year in high school, he was a straight-A student, honor roll student. He was the perfect child, basically. He did so good his whole life. And then as soon as he hit his senior year in high school, that's when it kicked in. That's when it really began. But all the way up until that point, my brother was the nicest, most loving, sincere person I knew. I felt confused. I felt kind of mad just because, those your older brothers are supposed to be your role models, and how can you look up to someone who's putting themselves in that kind of situation and doing that to themselves? You can't. There's no way you can look up to someone like that.
Our relationship before heroin, we were super close. We've always been best friends our entire life since I can remember. He was 2 when I was born, and apparently a month after I was born, he was trying to change my diaper to help out. He's always really cared about me and been super close with me, and our whole lives we've always been together no matter what. And then once he became addicted to heroin, everything turned around on us. We were still close friends, but it wasn't the same at all.
We were pretty normal before all my friends started using drugs. We would go out, we'd go hiking, we'd go, see movies, do normal things that typical teenagers would do. And then it just all changed, and it felt like it changed so fast. It went from us going out and doing fun things and being active every day to they just wanted to stay home. They weren't social with anyone anymore. It was just them and their little groups, and they didn't care if I was there, but they didn't want to leave the house or really be social with anybody but their group of heroin friends. It's strange because most people think that heroin addicts come from a certain type of family, But knowing so many, they all come from different types of families. Some of them are rich, some of them are poor. Some of their parents are really involved in their lives, and some of their parents just don't care and are never around.
And I think that a lot of the people up here are naive to it because they want to think their kids are doing good. We live in a very Mormon society, and I think they do, they're the people that are like, couldn't be my kid, my kid's not doing something wrong.
I don't believe it's a type of kid. I just believe it's a type of person who has emotions that they have not dealt with that are trying to escape in a different way.
I think I remember trying to be nice to him about it. It's okay. Just trying to think about it like pot kind of. Everybody just does it when you're a kid and then you grow up and you get out of it. It's not really that. It's not really the scenario with something that addictive when you want it like water,
Back here in this room was the second time I ever witnessed anything that had to do with heroin. I came in here and he was unconscious, laying on his bed. I called the cops, called the ambulance. They came and rushed him to the hospital, and apparently what had happened is he overdosed on heroin, and he'd been unconscious for about 30 minutes to an hour before anyone even noticed that he was just laying here. And luckily they said that if I wouldn't have done that, he could have stayed unconscious and he could have died. It honestly was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life, seeing someone you love so much being on the brink of, I don't even know, you think they're dead, you think that they might not get better, but that's all you can do is think until something actually happens, and it's one of the worst experiences of my life.
I mean, I don't know every person in Salt Lake City, but in my own extended circle of people I know, there's a heroin problem.
I'm sorry to say that I don't know very many people older than myself that do heroin. I know some that have used, but I know a plethora of kids younger than me that use on a regular basis that I'm very frightened for.
The youngest kids that I've come across doing heroin is probably about 14. That seems to be about the age when they start going into these older groups of kids. And the older kids don't mind because they're getting free heroin out of it, because the younger kids come in with money and buy for everyone because they're naive about it. A lot of the older kids will sell it to the younger kids because it's easy to rip them off, easy to make money off of them. It starts typically in middle school. Most of the kids I know that started doing heroin started in middle school.
I feel like it's hit the younger population more than the older population, because heroin here, from what I've heard from my brother, is very easy to get compared to other drugs.
I don't think anybody wakes up one day and is just like, yeah, you know what I want to do today? Heroin. If you can see someone else having a good time with it, and if it's the people you you are who you hang out with, in my opinion. So it's like, if you hang out with people that are doing heroin, you're probably doing heroin.
Just hearing about it, wanting to try something new, hearing that it's a good feeling, and then you get that feeling and you just want it again and again and again.
It's the very dominant culture of Salt Lake City that a lot of people in our generation have expectations from everyone around them, their parents and their teachers and their friends. They have all this weight on their shoulders to live a certain way and have these certain morals, and it can be a big burden to bear.
Especially when the people up here, a lot of them are really wealthy. And when you ask your parents to give you a little bit of money and they give you $100 and you go blow it on heroin, you ask them again, they give you another fucking $100 and you blow it on heroin.
They don't have time, they're working all the time, they don't have time to kind of be involved in their kids' lives, and so they make up with money. And then you have all these kids running around that have a lot of money and a lot of time and no supervision, and it's not very gradual. Once they start, it takes hold of you so fast. I've watched so many friends who said they'd never do it, try it one time, and within a couple of weeks, they're hooked.
And once you're in that hole with that gnarly of a drug, there's not much you can do to get back out.
I didn't know how powerful the drug was until after I lost a close friend.
When I found out that I had lost my best friend and to heroin, I saw him the night prior and he had gone out of town to get clean because his family ultimately had found out and sent him to his uncle's cattle ranch to get clean.
We were hanging out at his house, just a lot of my close friends from high school just watching a movie in his basement. And he had this glow about him. He just seemed to be more happy.
I could see the real Adam, not some transparent being or some, you know, some ghost with pinpricks in his eyes. I saw him at our local coffee shop and he looked really good.
But he had a look in his eyes where it was just, that burden was there. And he disappeared for about an hour. And we thought that he went upstairs to talk to his family or something of that nature. And then he came back that night and he wasn't high when he came home, like he was the exact same way as when he left. And he approached me and he's like, "Cade, will you sleep over at my house tonight?" And I had a friend coming home. I'm not coming home, coming to visit in the morning, so I had to go to the airport to pick her up. And so I couldn't sleep over. I had to leave and gave him like a great bear hug that he was famous for. And he's like, "I'll see you tomorrow."
I gave him a really big hug and then I looked around the corner and I saw one of the kids he used with approaching him. And my heart just fell into my stomach. Later that night, I tried calling him frantically because I was worried for him in his like current state, because I know how susceptible people are to falling back into that drug even after getting sober. And it wasn't until the next morning, for some reason, I slept in from going to work, and I woke up to a phone call saying my best friend, and who I considered a brother, had died because of heroin.
I was like, "You're lying, dude. Like, I was with him like 5 hours ago, like sitting in his basement, talking to him, like hugging him and engaging with him." He's like, "No, man. His brother found him this morning, overdosed." And I went completely numb, and it's just all one giant blur, and I don't remember feeling any happiness or any sadness or any peace or anything. Like, I was just,
For about 3 years straight, I can honestly say, basically my whole family was depressed. We all were just in our own little zone. The ones who were doing the drugs, they were staying away from us, we were staying away from them. My brothers were gone 90% of the time, neither of them were in the house anymore. My dad, he'd go to work all day, he'd come home, and you could just tell he was depressed. When you see someone that you're that close to going through something like that, there's nothing worse. It really does change who you are right off the bat, right as soon as you see it.
He just like incognitally impacted like a lot of bullshit. I mean, like, even like some stealing money. Like, he stole like over like $10,000 from my parents.
After his freshman year of college, he came to my parents and told them that he was addicted to heroin. They put him in a treatment at the University of Utah for 2 weeks, and then the doctor recommended that he leave Utah. So for a month and a half, he was in Minnesota in a detox program, and then he flew straight to Long Beach, California, where he did another 3 months of intense therapy and a month of sober living.
He was sober for probably a month. And he had told me, he's like, "Okay, I'm serious this time, like I'm doing it." And I had never been more relieved in my life. He was looking healthier, he was eating right, he was hanging out with me all the time.
I've really wanted him home for my graduation.
One day his friend, Tori, called both of us up on our phones and said that his car had broken down. Well, we drove up to find him and he ran out of gas, so we went and got gas with him. And my brother told me on the way back, he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go home with Tori today just to make sure that his car makes it back. Just fine. And I was like, I don't know, dude, like, maybe we should just follow him. I don't really want you going with him. I don't trust him at all. Like, he's still doing heroin and you're not. You're clean. And he's like, I'm smart enough to know, like, that I shouldn't do that anymore. Like, I'm fine, Ashley. Like, you can trust me.
2 days before my high school graduation, he relapsed.
My brother walked in the door and I looked at him and I instantly knew. I looked at his eyes and they were as small as pencil tips. Like, they were the tiniest that I had ever seen his eyes.
It was really hard because I felt like it was my fault because I wanted him here for my high school graduation. And the 3 days that he was here, he used again.
And I didn't give him a second chance. I looked at him in the eyes and I ran out of the building and I started bawling my eyes out. And I drove off in my car and I had sat in my car for probably a good 3 hours just crying.
I went downstairs to where he was and I told him that I never wanted to see him again and that I didn't care if he died.
Shortly after, like, that 6 months, he came up to me, and it was the summer of 2010. He came up to me and he had told me that he was going to move to Moab, and he looked at me in the eyes and he started crying. And he told me that he knew at the time if he didn't get out of Salt Lake now that he was going to die because he could never get away from heroin.
So now he's back in a different treatment. He's in wilderness camp right now in North Carolina. And then he'll be going to Maine for sober living.
Finally, like a couple months later, my dad and we decided to take a trip down there to visit him. And we got there and we went to lunch together. And I had never been more nervous in my life. We walked up to meet him at a lunch place and I instantly started crying because I could see it in his face that he was clean and he was healthy again. And he was finally sober.
Parents need to be more aware of what their kids are doing because so many parents don't know the signs of kids doing heroin. They don't know what pinned pupils mean or what scratches on the back mean or what chapped lips or pale faces mean. They don't know what the crackly voice means. They don't know how to see that their kids are doing heroin.
Try to look at it not in a positive way, but try to understand what they're going through and don't be so judgmental towards them. Because if you judge them, they're going to shut you out of their lives.
Judgments are going to push that person away from you even further.
Don't stop loving them. Just like don't, Just be there every time you can tell that they need help. Make sure you're always there because then that's just in the back of their head, whether they know it or not, in the back of their head subconsciously, that's just going to lead up to them realizing that you actually care about them.
That person that's using it is your brother. That's you.
I feel like if you're always there for them, eventually they will get out of it. But it's when people give up on people that people give up on themselves.
I want to talk about the positivity that's come from this. I mean, we could talk about the sadness and the heartbreak and the hard stuff, but we've come on the other side of, well, at least I have, and I think Taylor has. We've come on the other side, and we're still smiling. And we still have food in our stomachs and a roof over our head and friends. And Adam really, really taught me how to show love to the closest ones in my life. As hard as it was to lose Adam and the funeral and the open casket and all that really rough stuff that I had to deal with, I've come on the other side personally and I've grown a lot from it. I'm a lot more mature and I'm a lot more loving, and I'm just saying, like, there's positivity that can come from all bad situations in life. Like, I mean, the night's always darkest before the dawn, right?